Welcome to Ambient Discourses, conversations with musicians and composers who create musical experiences and sonic landscapes. My guest on the program is Daman Hoffman from Little Rock, Arkansas, creator of the ambient music project Ceramic, a relatively newer addition to the ambient music scene, releasing their first EP in the summer of 2022. Daman and I had a thoroughly enjoyable conversation spanning such topics as his journey towards sobriety, some of the practices that help him find balance when creating music, and even diving deeper into philosophical and almost spiritual topics as it pertains to being a creator. I think that you'll find some enlightening moments during our conversation with bits of wisdom you can take with you and think on for yourself. But without further delay, please welcome my guest, Daman Hoffman of the ambient music project Ceramic. Daman, it's wonderful to have you on the podcast and to feature your music. Of course, I'm no stranger to your music. We've played, I think some of the first submissions that we started receiving from you were from the Tender Hearth release, which, by the way, is really gorgeous.
Thank you.
I think we've also got some from the Cast Breath as released, but now you've got this brand new single that I've listened to deeply and just really excited. But I'm super excited to have you on the program. Welcome. It's great.
Thank you, Michael. I'm really excited to be a part of this.
Yeah.
You're one of the first radio shows that I actually submitted music to, and so I thank you for being so open and welcoming, especially to new musicians.
Well, the program is a much different beast than your average program because I'm quite honestly, I'm really more interested in the independent artists who are slogging it hard and they're working tirelessly to try and make it heard and make it available and accessible to wider audiences. So I really love talking to the people who are just working really hard on their own end to get their music out there and don't necessarily have the luxury of a label and a budget to work with. So
for me, that's a big part of the fun of the whole thing. I get to use both sides of my brain creating ambient music. You know, one side is actually creating the sounds, and whenever I'm in the promotional zone and trying to figure out how to get this release out there, get listeners, it's kind of a fun little challenge to put those pieces together.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you've found yourself having to adapt to and some of the challenges that you've addressed? How have you addressed some of those things?
Well, a lot of the tools that are available these days are for playlisters, for streaming platforms such as Submit Hub, which is probably one of the most useful promotional tools that I've encountered for my genre, at least. One challenge is that ambient music, as Brian Eno said, it has to be as ignorable as it is interesting, and so it's not necessarily something that people are champing at the bit to listen to. It's hard to get people excited about a 7-minute instrumental song. So you do have to rely a lot on passive listening. You have to just kind of accept that if you're not a big name with millions of followers already, if you don't have your music in TV shows and movies, you have to rely a lot on playlists, Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora. And so a challenge has just been, getting my music to those curators and listening to their feedback whenever I get a rejection, which is frequent. But just graciously listening to them, and they do provide a lot of valuable feedback for why they don't accept a song, such as, it's too long, or you need more elements. Although there's so many different tastes and so many different flavors of ambient music. For one curator, something might be too lively, but the same song, somebody else might say it's, too monotonous. So it's really hard to kind of.
That it is hard to navigate the
like, what do I
adding
do?
taste and preference. Ooh.
Yeah, so you just have to find where you want to go, and you have to research all the places that you think your music would be a good fit on. At least that's what I've had to do, and I've identified several playlists that I enjoy listening to and that I think my music would, vibe with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just kind of concentrated on those curators and listening to, what they say to me and how they say, and it's helped me grow as an artist. I mean, I've only been releasing as the project Ceramic for a year, and so it's very new to me. I feel like it's been like a total crash course in just how to create and release and promote ambient music. It's really been enjoyable.
So you've talked about the effort that it requires to get your music out there and adapting to the criteria that these curators and these playlists have. How do you balance, what is the balance for you in the purity of your self-expression in your own voice versus kowtowing to the criteria or the needs of these playlists?
For me, the compositional aspect of my songs are really where my soul goes, I think. And so as long as I can put the melodies that come to me in my songs, the way I build the textures or, EQ the track or even edit the length. I mean, I prefer long form pieces. I've got a great attention span. I can listen to an ambient track that's over an hour long and just be so satisfied. But most people want it to be 5 or 4 minutes or so. And so, in a way, I can kind of expand a long form piece into like a larger project and just kind of, chop it up a little bit. And so that, each section is a different song and I can kind of navigate that criteria that way. But as far as like building the texture, the different elements that I add to it, that's all just is that my dog?
That's my dog. She is, she's a barker. So this is a recurring theme in our home. I'll be in the middle of a voiceover and UPS drives by and then I have to wait 10 minutes until she's done.
You're probably going to get a lot of that on my end too, because the cable people are outside working on the pole, and so my dog is going to be like really excited about that.
That's okay. It'll be our natural field recording here of dogs barking during an interview. Okay. So back to my train of thought, wherever that was. So how do I navigate the challenges and what's the balance like for you between that? Yeah.
Everything's all about the balance. I feel like I'm not like changing my artistic vision or anything like that to suit another individual or a playlist or even to meet the requests of different listeners that contact me. It's really just about in the mix, in the edit, and how I mean, a lot of it does come down to the length of the track and how present the low end is or how present the high end is. So there's, I don't know, it's a lot of trial and error, really. And there's, I guess part of my experiment this past year has been in releasing shorter EPs just to try to see, where the edges are. How far can I go this way? How far can I go that way? There's been a few releases that I thought were very me. I mean, they felt very maybe a little self-indulgent. And those weren't received very well. So I was like, okay, so maybe that was too self-indulgent as far as like some of the nostalgic melodies and different tape warbles and stuff like that I added in. So I was like, okay, maybe a little bit less of that, or make it a more subtle effect in the future.
Interesting.
Yeah,
so you're kind of you're almost performing like a litmus test as you're composing and releasing music, in a way.
In a way, yeah. This is very new to me. I mean, I've only been releasing music at all in the past 3 or 4 years. Although I've been, writing songs and creating music my whole life, since about 3 decades. But really, none of that made any sense. It was all very from the ego. It was all very, me. It was all about writing songs that were trying to get me attention, which felt very, wrong for me. And so when I started in the more sound healing realm, I do sound baths all over Arkansas. And when I started using sound as a way to, meditate and just facilitate healing and calmness, things started to change for me. I started to make music for like a different purpose, not just to serve my ego, but just to create something to, soothe and calm and just kind of help people drift away.
You mentioned ego, and this is a theme that's been recurring for me as well, and it's come up in other conversations that I've had with other musicians, that for them, their music is an extension like of their spiritual practice. Some, with their roots maybe in Buddhist or Taoist traditions, some with more secular humanist traditions. What has kind of led you into this awakening of that ego is an issue, or could potentially be an issue, and how you responded to that and how you evolved during that?
I think it all relates to my sobriety. I used to be a terrible alcoholic. In 2019, I just decided to quit drinking, and just after that, everything just started to fall into place for me. And so it was sort of a second adolescence for me. Like I was drunk every day of my adult life, basically, just as a way to, self-medicate and deal with, unresolved trauma from my childhood, or, whatnot. And so just quitting drinking and just facing the world just as the most authentic version of myself, I had to figure out what that was. And so it was sort of a spiritual awakening as well, even though I don't really follow any certain practice, but it was, just me trying to discover who I was again. And that's what sort of informed the music. That's why I started the sound therapy training, and that's really what led me into feeling comfortable even releasing music. So
it's interesting you mentioned that, for you, it was changing your life into embracing sobriety as your norm. And I had maybe a little bit different but similar experience where earlier this year I'd stopped drinking and noticed subtle transformations in myself.
Yeah.
Like a lot less depression, for starters. There's less compulsion and impulsive behavior, and just an overall lift in my countenance. What have been some things that you noticed in yourself when you chose a life of sobriety?
Well, some of the most immediate things I noticed was the sensations, just going outside and just smelling the grass, hearing the wind in the trees, just everything just felt more enhanced in a way. I wasn't as numb to a lot of the little details of the world. That's one of the first things I noticed. I also noticed that simple things like, just drinking a cup of herbal tea and just sitting in quiet and meditating, or just more of a profound effect. I definitely felt like I wasn't as anxious all the time, which was strange because I thought I was drinking to help with my anxiety. But but I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling so. I'm still a little got a little social anxiety, I suppose. I'm definitely a loner, but I don't get as nervous about situations that I invent in my head anymore. I also felt more compelled to take care of myself, as far as like eating healthier, eating better, to be more, grateful in my interactions with friends and family, and just kind of be less closed off and just be a little bit more open to just not just receive, but also to give.
And how has that kind of translated into when you're creating music? Have you noticed a difference in like the tone and even the process of creating?
Oh, for sure. Well, now it's more like it's not about me. It's more about, I don't know. I sometimes feel like melodies are just coming to me from some other place. I don't feel as much like it's coming from within. And so I feel more like I'm channeling something, some kind of energy, some sort of feeling. And that's not something I think I ever noticed before. I've been getting, and some people have intrusive thoughts. I get intrusive melodies. And so I used to carry around, like in the pre iPhone days, I had this little micro cassette recorder I'd take around with me to work everywhere. And just something would come in my head, and I would just have to go to the bathroom at work and just like sing it out or something. But so I'm always, something's beaming me down these melodies. And before, I was just kind of letting them accumulate, I suppose. But now, when I receive those, I'm like, what do I do with this? How do I form this into something larger? How do I make it a song? But it's also, I'm not making music so much for myself. A lot of my projects are more about, meditation, kind of like a new age sort of sound meditation vibe. So it's, I don't know. It's definitely changed how I interpret the inspiration that I received.
Let's step away from the conversation for just a minute, and we're going to listen to the brand new single by Ceramic. This is entitled Now That You're Here, here on Ambient Discourses. I've noticed that too. When your mind is clearer and you have less baggage going on upstairs and less things that are weighing you down, it almost gives you this higher heightened awareness of things like you were saying, just even your observations about nature, and when you're going on a walk, that things seem more vivid, right?
Absolutely.
And so I had this conversation. I've started to become friends with Robert Rich, and I just love the man to death. We were having this conversation about, we were talking about our respective spiritual backgrounds, and quite honestly, I was soliciting him for his experiences so that I could learn and apply them, and learn from them and apply them, respective different things to my own disciplines and my own journey. And he was talking about how embracing some of the simple universal facets of spirituality, for lack of a better term, have, like, the daily disciplines of simple things, of embracing simple life and simple living, and
yes,
that the byproduct of that for him and others that he's seen in this expression, that it creates a more heightened awareness of the beauty in the simple things, in the everyday things, in the mundane things. Would you say that that's been kind of true for you?
Yeah, that resonates with me as well. And there is definitely a clarity involved. It's where there was a lot of fog before I quit drinking. I mean, now there's a lot less fog. And so I do notice a lot of the simple things, a lot of the daily tasks, they just feel more meaningful. And I do take more time with them just to kind of enjoy the process. And I've also, living simply is important to me as well, just to have a daily routine and a daily practice that just, just helps me keep that clarity going.
What are some practices that have been indispensable for you? I know you've mentioned meditation. Are there other things that have become indispensable, things that, like, if you missed, like if you skipped out on one of your practices, you would notice the effect in your life?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know if you can see all the gongs that are around me, but every morning, the first thing I do before, I let my dog out first, but then after that, I sit down in front of a gong and I will meditate. I will just play the gong and I will just connect with it. And I do that every single day. I've done that every day for 4 years. And it helps set the tone for the day. I use a different gong for each chakra. And so, one day will be, my root chakra. Today it was my sacral chakra. And I'll just, maybe it'll take about 10 or 15 minutes that I'll sit and I'll breathe with it and I'll play the gong and just listen to it. And for me, that also indicates where I'm out of alignment. And so gongs are very sensitive. If it's not resonating with me, that's telling me that, I've kind of gone off a little bit and I need to try to find my way back to my center. So I definitely love starting my day with the gongs because it just kind of helps me know where I am. And if I'm okay where I'm at, or if I need to try to adjust my course a little. So that's definitely something I don't think I could go on a vacation without my gongs or anything, because I would definitely miss that.
Yeah, right. What are some other things that have been really valuable for you? Like, are there any books or authors or types of subject matter that you're regularly reading, or podcasts or other things that have been beneficial for you?
Well, I also I host a radio program of my own on Sundays, and so I've been doing that almost a year now, and so that would definitely be a ritual that is very meaningful to me. It's called Rivulets and Reveries, and it's a 2-hour soundscape of ambient, contemplative instrumental music, and just receiving all of that music from different artists and labels, and finding a way to piece all of it together in a way that is, a mindful flow. I mean, that's another daily thing that I definitely look forward to. But yeah, I listen to ambient music, I mean, every moment that I can, not just for, the radio show, but just because I'm just obsessed with it.
How long have you been doing the radio program? And tell me more about it.
So I started in August of last year. So I think I've had 47 episodes so far. Okay. It's called Rivulets and Reveries. It's on KOBV-LP, Bentonville, Arkansas. So it's on a community radio station in Bentonville, which is a really vibrant arts center. I'm in Little Rock, so I do the show remotely, but it's very atmospheric, soothing, and relaxing. I don't play anything with like a strong rhythmic presence or a beat, and no discernible lyrics or words. So there's been a lot of really wonderful songs that I've had to pass on just because there's like maybe a few spoken words in the background. Right. Yeah. And I always start with a body of water. So a song that has, something about the ocean or a lake or a sea in the title. And I know I'm going to start there, and then I just kind of let that song guide me to the next song. And then I always end with a reverie, a dream. And so I create these bookends, and I fill in, one is body of water, one is a dream. And I just try to find 2 hours of music between there. Yeah. In addition, I'm always will play at least one Arkansas artist, which can be challenging because there's not very many of us that fit my format. There's a lot of more rootsy Americana type acts here in Arkansas, and there's also a lot of noise experimental when I go over to the instrumental side. And so to find the more peaceful and gentle, drifty sort of music, it's a little bit challenging. But I also always make sure that I'm always playing female artists as well. I don't want it to be just a boys club. And I also make sure that I'm always representing people of color, indigenous people as well, which is also difficult sometimes because a lot of ambient musicians don't make their identity very visible. And so usually you just never know if it's a man or a woman who is creating the music.
Right. That, of course, is a tremendous challenge, trying to approach inclusion in playlists and inclusion in programs, ensuring that there's gender equity and that there's that you're adequately representing people of different minority groups. Of course, on many levels, gender really is kind of irrelevant, but to your point of inclusion and making an effort, it is a little bit of a challenge, especially when identity is more intangible and it's more associated with a concept than it is someone as an individual. But, there are many fantastic women in ambient music representing so many different facets of ambient music. Just to name a few that we've featured on the program, and it's, of course, a small number, but we've had, like in the neoclassical and solo piano realm, we've played music from Alicia Redmond. Who are some other ones? We've got Claire Fitch and Idis Avenson, and who are some other ones? We've got Jamie Sieber, Kate Moore, Kristen Miller, Maya Sand, and of course on the traditional ambient and even some of the more avant-garde side of things, you've got some of the artists like Avenue Azure. One of the members of that act is a woman. You've got Christina Giannone, I think that's how it's pronounced, and Elen, we've played on the program numerous times. Plus, on the more new age side of things, of course, we've got Sherry Finzer.
Love Sherry Finzer. Love her.
She's a gem of a human being. I love her indigenous flute playing. And she, of course, she runs Heart Dance Records label, mm-hmm. and she's been instrumental in helping other people, pardon the pun there. She actually, don't pardon my pun. I'm going to just fully embrace my dad jokes. So let's check out another track from Ceramic. This is actually one of the first tracks that we were introduced to. This comes from the Tender Hearth EP and is called Still This Untended Hearth Remembers Blue Blazes, here on Ambient Discourses. to kind of breach into another topic of when we are looking or relying on the listenership of things, and we see, wow, only 5 people liked my music, and I sold enough on Bandcamp last year to buy myself a cup of coffee, maybe 2, or I have enough to go get 25 cents out of my Spotify listeners. So
it can be so disheartening.
It can.
And it is a lot of work sometimes, and it's exhausting, especially if you have a full-time job like I do, and you're also doing other things, or if you're raising a family. I don't know how you'd be able to balance all of that, and then having to push yourself to put this music out, and then see oh, I love this song, and it only got 5 spins in its first month. But yeah,
it is absolutely disheartening if your motivation is, if you at least have any sort of attachment to a response, even negative responses. But so to almost get zen for just a minute, what do you think, or how do you think attachment plays in a role in how we process those sorts of things?
Well, I think sometimes we can kind of get hooked on that validation, like when we do have a song that's been successful, however we define success. So we get attached to that feeling of those kudos, people saying, oh, I love that song, or, watching the numbers grow every day. If you're looking at your streaming numbers. So it can be dangerous to get attached to that, because then, if your next release isn't as consistent, then it's crushing. And then it's hard to find the motivation to keep creating more music and keep trying again. You do have to free yourself from attachments in a way. You do have to sort of, somewhat accept that you're putting the music out in the world. It'll find the people that need to listen to it, and just let it be like that. It is kind of nice to see those big numbers when you have a successful song, but you can't just let that be the thing that motivates you to keep going, because it's not sustainable. That being said, I think the most artist-friendly streaming platform is probably Pandora, which is it's only here in the U.S. So like a lot of international artists they can still put their music on it, but they wouldn't be able to listen to it. But they have a lot of amazing tools to promote your songs, and I'm just a little feather in my cap. I've got 1.7 million streams on Pandora, which is well over 1 million more than any other platform. So for me personally, I've gotten a paycheck from a couple different songs there that was enough to pay for my mortgage. And so that was a huge boost to my self-esteem. And but at the same time, cashing that check, I'm like, I know this is not the norm. This is just like a little bonus. This is just a little neat little thing that happened. Surely I'm not going to get a nice little paycheck every month. But, so Pandora, though, is highly recommended. If you don't have a presence on that platform, definitely need to make sure that you're using their tools. They have a really great algorithm too. They have this musical genome that whenever you submit your songs to them, it will look for hundreds of different criterias, tone, texture, and everything. And they use that information to sort the music together. And I don't know, I've been very lucky that their algorithms have selected quite a few of my songs to get played on different stations. So big shout out to Pandora. Thank you for giving my music a fair shot.
Yeah, it's really, I think that's a valuable tip for the listeners that are musicians. I would even add to that, if you use a submission service, like I use Amuse is a fantastic one. I've had nothing but good things to say about them. They've been very accommodating when I have special needs or requests. Like I went through three or four different submission services until I finally found one that would be accommodating to my insanely long album titles.
Wait, how long are your album titles?
Well, all right. Side story.
Okay.
When I first, so I'd been making instrumental music for a number of years, a couple decades, but then I finally started reaching out to make ambient music in 2021. But it was as an extension of a Twitch stream that I was running. So it was a mix of pre-composed music that I created on stream during one point of the week, and then I had what I just dubbed in the relay station. It was a time when I would live stream some of the compositions that I made that week prior, and then follow it up with improv for the rest of the stream. And so I would collect all these pieces and go, I like that one. These are the other ones. And I would compile these into releases every month. But I wanted to make sure that people that see the album title knew that this was not my normal stuff that I was making prior to that. So it branded it Relay Station. And I had these slashes, and then the year, and then the month name in Latin, and or maybe no, it was French. Was it French? Yeah, it was French. And I don't know why French. I just went with French. And the first couple submission services that I used, they were changing my album titles without my consent.
No.
And there was one I'm not going to name them outright, but there was one service that this was a perpetual problem, and I would have to submit tickets saying, no, you are not allowed to do this. If you're going to make changes to any of my metadata, you need my consent first.
Holy cow.
And it was to the point where, like, I had already established the precedent out on Apple iTunes, which is the big thing that they're most concerned about being accepted at Apple Music. And but I was like, I already have albums out there that have this naming convention. Allow my stuff. And this was a monthly thing. And finally, it wasn't until I found Amuse, and then once I got through the initial hurdle of transferring music over, they've been a dream to work with. But circling back to our conversation about Pandora, one additional tip that I would give is to make sure you and this is not for you, but for everyone else, to make sure that you babysit those initial submissions into Pandora, because I noticed initially that some of my submissions weren't even making it in. And I had to go back and proactively go, we submitted this, and here's the ISRC numbers and all of the things. And then eventually the albums made their way into the playlist or into their repository. But that little extra hand-holding of your submissions pays off.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed from being a curator myself and accepting submissions from a lot of different artists is that nobody seems to realize that Pandora is a curated service. And so even though your distributor, your aggregator may send the music to Pandora, it's still just available for their premium on-demand listeners. If you want to be in their radio service, you have to go in and you have to submit each song. And it's just, this is one extra step.
Yeah.
But it makes a huge difference. But I have enjoyed like finding a presence on each of these different streaming platforms. Some that I can't even listen to because I have an American IP address, but like Angami, GeoSav, there's all kinds of different streaming platforms around the world that if you maintain a presence there, they have tools for pitching your music to their playlist. You can build your own playlist, and so it's important to kind of, not that anyone really has the time to do this, but babysit your music on every platform. I also have to do it just because my name is Ceramic, and there are a couple dozen other ceramics out there creating other music, and so sometimes my songs get put on the wrong profile, and so like I have this whole ritual after I make a release. I'm like, okay, email iHeart Music, email all these other places, Deezer. I'm like,
it's almost like you have to have the template to handle those situations and just copy paste.
But it's some of them are just the best service. Like iHeartRadio is just Johnny on the spot. Like every time I send them a request, they get it handled fast. Some other platforms like YouTube takes a little bit longer, I've noticed. They've got a lot going on, so don't blame them. Amazon takes a little bit longer too. But yeah, I think it's important just to have a little bit of control over how your music is being presented out there as well. So babysitting is a good way to put it.
We're going to pause the conversation here for just a moment and check out a track from Ceramic's 2022 EP release, Cast Breath. This is entitled Cast Your Breath Upon the Waters, here on Ambient Discourses. How did you settle in on the name Ceramic?
It's long been one of my favorite words, and there's really two reasons. There's a song by one of my favorite singers that nobody really knows about. Her name's Heather Nova, and on her second album, Siren, the last song, Not Only Human, one of the lines is, "When you're sleeping, you're ceramic. You're surrounded by little stars. Every shimmer is a searchlight. Every galaxy is ours." And that's just one of those. Yeah, it's. Oh, and her voice. I don't know if you ever listened to her, but her delivery is just. It just gives me chills. Yeah. Chills, and like, I mean, as a teenager listening to that, it was just. I don't know. It fits with me every day. So the word ceramic was. Whenever I was thinking about what should I call this, I'm like, oh, I'll just call it ceramic. But I also, I sort of thought about my process for shaping the sounds. Ceramic is it's all in the piano roll. Most of the music I do is just very improvisational with real instruments, singing bowls, gongs, harps, flutes. But when I started ceramic, just exactly a year ago, I just wanted to disconnect from. I guess I was feeling need to disconnect from humanity, from the real world. Just feeling very frustrated at the time, and one reason for that was because it was the 4th of July, and my neighborhood is very boisterous. There's a lot of fireworks, illegal fireworks, and celebratory gunfire all around me. So it was hard to record anything with microphones with all this noise, and it was just, my little dog and me, our nerves were shot. So I just woke up one day and I was like, well, what is this piano roll? I mean, can't I just like make little dots in this little grid? I mean, and so I started thinking of like, oh, this is my clay, and I'm shaping these little sounds into like a little vessel to hold this feeling, this emotion that I'm having. And so that's another. I was just thinking about ceramics, and I have a friend. His name's Ian, and he is an actual ceramic artist. He creates very interesting ceramic pieces, and he had given me this ceramic mug, and I just thought the texture on the very bottom of it was so beautiful. It was just so smooth and pure. And so I took a picture of just the bottom of it, and I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, that. I used that as the cover for my first release because it was just the texture of it was just so smooth and clean, and it just resonated with me. But yeah. That's why I picked ceramic. That's a long story.
That metaphor resonates with me as well. It's a way of explaining at least my musical process. Similarly, it's sculpting.
It is sculpting.
You start out with a rough idea, a rough medium. Maybe it's a drone, maybe it's a melodic component, or maybe it's a particular sound or sample, and then you start whittling away at that, adding on different things, kind of, and sculpting as you go. And the refinement process kind of, maybe happens later, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just a rough sculpture in itself. But yeah, that resonates with me.
Yeah, maybe the glazing is the adding the different effects, right, and the reverbs and delays, and then when you master it, you're putting it in the kiln, getting it ready. Yeah. So I like the word too, the way it just rolls off the tongue, ceramic. I don't like that so many other people are using it though. That is kind of a hassle.
Well, let me help at least make things feel a little bit more pleasant and acceptable for you. It's a lot easier to deal with having a name that is not a uniquely generated word like Stolas. where continually search engines and all of the algorithms are, oh, you mean Solace?
No, I don't.
No, I don't. And it's the default. I have routinely been, once in a while, I'll just kind of email Spotify or YouTube and like, can you please add Solace into your lexicon, please? It's driving me nuts, and it's literally driving other people away, you know?
Yeah. So why did you pick Solace?
That's
you
a
said
good
randomly
question.
Generated.
So back in 2019, and I'll make this short so I'm not taking up all the time but I had reached a point in my life when I was angry all the time. And part of it was informed by our political culture here in the United States and feeling powerless. But I was just angry with humanity. I was angry with myself, and I just felt like completely powerless to do anything about it. And I somehow, the algorithms in the universe aligned on YouTube, and I came across an introduction on the philosophy of Stoicism.
Okay.
And and I was like, huh. And it was this practical framework for how to deal with your emotions, your opinions about things, your attachments, your aversions. And I started out by trying to work that out and apply it to some of the lower hanging fruit aspects of my life, like how I behave in my commute to work back when you actually commuted into work, and other facets of my life. And then I started to see how that was changing me and for the better, and empowering me to start to care less about externals. The Stoics are really big about externals, about in fact they have a tool called the dichotomy of control, understanding the difference between what is in your control and what is not.
Okay.
The things that are in your control are very finite. There's a very small list. It's your opinions, it's your actions, your speech, to some extent your thoughts, and things that are basically, if it's coming out of your pie hole or coming out of your extremities as an expression of yourself and you have agency, that's within your control.
Yeah.
Whereas the things that are out of your control, you have no business worrying about. In fact, you're wasting energy. You're even to draw parallels into Taoism or Zen Buddhism or whatever, you are creating suffering for yourself.
Yes.
And when I started to see how that had shaped me and changed me, I decided I'm going to apply this to my music. Well, at the time, I was not making music, and I was very close to just selling all of my gear, hanging it up, because I too, like many other artists, was really frustrated because no one was listening to my music, and I felt, why the hell am I doing this?
Right.
And when I went on a long nature walk, and I was processing through some of the facets of Stoicism, but then I decided, why am I not applying this to music and that? And so then I started going through the exercise of, all right, as it pertains to creating music, what's in my control? And the list was really small. I can control how often I practice to some extent, as my schedule allows. I can do my very best. I can come to music creation, composition with a good attitude or an open attitude. I can also reduce my opinions about what's important. Things like, I don't need to be heard. I don't need the listens on Spotify. I don't need the things that are expressions of the commodifying of music. And all of the other things were just, out of my control, and were slowly becoming more and more irrelevant the more that I continued to work on this. And it required work. It required journaling. It required thinking about these things and meditating on these things and actively rooting out some of the things that fed into my imposter syndrome, fed into my fear of rejection, fed into my depression because no one's listening to my stuff. And so all that to see, so Stoicism had a very profound effect in terms of reshaping the place from which I create music. And as I started to venture out into creating music again with that new framework, I decided I want my music to be representative of those ideas and that space. And so that's where kind of I took the term Stoicism and mixed it with the word solace or solace. Yeah. The idea of that, here's the tool, here's the framework that started the process, and here's the desired outcome, is I want to be in a place of peace and a place of serenity and contentment, regardless of what the outcome is, and to be fully content, fully present in what I create, as a leading to one of your earlier points, you're a conduit. You're opening yourself up to the mysterious force of the universe and being available and ready and sensitive to whatever happens. And then you just express yourself, and just pour it out. And then, balancing the emotion with the intellect, coming back to it and going, okay, this is good. Now, what do I realistically need to refine here to maybe help improve its listenability, or to maybe remove some of the facets where I get a little too self-indulgent. So that's kind of how I settled in on the name Stolas. But I tell you, though, for the amount of times I deal with it every day. Every time I have to post something, and I rely on, like, for instance, AI or other things to try and help me generate captions and whatnot. It's perpetual frustration where, yep, okay, here it comes. It's come to the point where, like, on my phone or on my computer, I have shortcuts for replacing Solace Real Estate with Stolas Relay Station. In fact, I've started collecting this list of bad, like the equivalent of bad lip reading, with all of the variations of Stolas Relay Station that I've seen in terms of autocorrect, and the list is kind of amusing.
There's a little bit of irony there in that a name you've chosen due to wanting to be free of attachments is creating so many frustrations. And
it is.
It has become another attachment. Thank you for sharing that with me. While I was listening to you talk about the Stoicism and all the ways in which it relates to your creative process and life in general, it's just, I was like, okay, I feel that too. That was very meaningful to me.
Good.
So thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
I think that's a very universal thing to want to be free and to just kind of not let all those things bother you. Whether you're in traffic or whatever the low-hanging fruit may be.
Yeah. There was so I think this might have been Ram Dass, I think, when he was talking about and he comes kind of more of like an Eastern Eastern spiritual and mysticism tradition. But he was talking about creativity and the unique predicament that we have in the West, or at least the broader West perspective, that ego is so much a part of the equation of creation, whereas in the East, many, if not most, artists don't ascribe their name at all to their works.
Oh.
And this idea of, well, I'm just the vessel, so why does my name to be on this? I think about, like, for example, the Buddhist monastic tradition of creating the works of art with sand and soil and rocks, different colored textures and materials to create these elaborate works of art on the ground, only for it all to be swept up and discarded at the end of the day.
Just very ephemeral.
Yeah, it is like, I think it's a perspective that would be really interesting to see how that could play out for us as creators, to where the greater value becomes in the meditative process of creating music, and caring less and less and less about the actual final product and what happens as a result.
That's hard for me to fathom. I'm something of a hoarder in lots of ways, not just material things, but like ideas and decades worth of cassettes of just fragments of melodies and things that I want to save, but I have no real intention of doing anything with it all. That's something that's hard for me to grasp. I wonder why. I don't know. Is there like a security aspect of it where I feel like if I hang on to these things and then I just feel more safe? I don't know. But yeah, the idea of creating something that's just there for a moment and then disappears, it's hard to get to. Although whenever I'm presenting a sound bath, I mean, it is like that in a way. I never think about what I'm going to play beforehand. I'm just kind of there in the moment to, play the singing bowls and the harps and flutes and just kind of just let the sound exist in that space for those people. And so in a way it's kind of like that, but I hadn't thought about how to relate that to actually creating music.
That I think that's a direct parallel. That, in fact, I'm having this crossover, like this, and it feels like electricity in my brain. I had this conversation when I was talking with Robert yesterday, Robert Rich, and I can't think of it now. Darn it.
Did you record a session with him?
I did. I recorded, but actually, he and I initially, when we were talking about having this conversation, I said, I want to record this, but for my own benefit. I said, maybe if we both find this to be universally edifying for other people, I'll release it in the podcast. But I said, to be honest, this is for me. And I've been this sponge lately where, like, I had, last year is when I really last summer I started meditating more frequently. And it started out as like a therapeutic thing, like just trying to calm my mind down. But then I really started to have a little bit of an awakening, and I started coming across some of these other philosophers or teachers or whatever. They're squarely in more of the mystic camps.
Yeah.
Like I think about Alan Watts, some of the things that he's had to say, and I alluded to Ram Dass. I don't really ascribe to any particular religion, but I feel like there's something bigger, and I can glom onto like the scientific or the physics approach to things, like how really even as you start to dive into the depths of who we are, that, you know, we have all of these cells, and even the cells themselves are made up of molecules, and those molecules made up of atoms, and even how our skin, how we feel like it's this physical barrier between us and the world, that barrier is permeable. And Robert Rich was talking about, here we go, this idea that 40% of us is DNA from other things, viruses, other cellular life, other things, bacteria, both harmful and good and beneficial bacteria, and that really the boundaries of who we are is permeable. And by extension, that we really have a connectivity to each other that is masked by the illusion of self and other. And so now I know where exactly I was going with this. Thank you, universe. This idea of that there is something broader there. There's a greater sense of connection to, you know, some people use the term God, some people use the term Buddha, Allah, that's their metaphors. Some people I use the more broad term of universe, because there's less baggage.
Yeah.
For me, at least in my history, but this idea of this, we have a shared space as individuals, and that really behind it all, we're all one. We're all a part of this massive ecosystem, and the idea of ego is a myth. The idea of ego, this us versus them mentality, is an illusion, and a well-intended lie that we tell ourselves. A well-intended lie. I want to make sure that well-intended is in there, because, you know, I would like to think that humanity is generally sincere about our observations, you know, and we have to some extent have this vocabulary to be able to talk about things. But back to kind of the Taoist and the Zen traditions, this idea of unity with the cosmos, with each other, that in that unity we find that everything is a verb and not a noun. That as we live our life, as we express ourselves, as we respond to things, as we look in, everything about us is a verb. And it's the nouns that lead to these problems of when we have to label things, like...
Yes, okay.
So I'm thinking of the way we label ourselves. Like, if I were to try and point to myself, what is me? What am I? Am I these hands? Am I this body? Am I my thoughts? Am I my mind? Am I my experiences? And to some extent, yes. And we are each other. And I know that gets into really loosey-goosey stuff where Aunt Mildred would be like, that's crazy. Next thing next thing you know, you're gonna be this Hare Krishna, and you're gonna be handing out flowers at the airport. But the idea, though, that we're interdependent and we're all a part of the same ecosystem, and that we're we feed into each other and we're dependent on one another, I think it would be really interesting to see that played out in how we create, because that brings us back to of why we create, I think.
Yeah.
This idea of observing the universe and allowing the natural energy and influence of our environment, of the things that we see and the things that we experience, and to coalesce into some sort of response.
Wow, yeah. That's I fully agree with that as well. I do think that we are all interconnected. Even myself as kind of a loner, I guess I feel I have to protect my own energy a lot, but
sure.
I still value that interconnectedness. Yeah, maybe that is why I create. That is maybe the intention of, I don't know, just pulling something out from that universal, that central source, that infinite fountainhead, and just letting that filter through me. And maybe that's just that expression is just a way I can be a part of the interconnectedness of everything, and just feel more one with everything else, because that's just the output and the input that feels comfortable to me.
Yeah. If you think about it, it's kind of I've used this analogy before too, that as we create, and even on the yin yang opposite of that, as we even destroy, it's a continuation of the energy emitted from the Big Bang. If to use that as a metaphor of itself too, you think about represented in the universe, both the destructive and the creative powers of stars as they change their status, or the way that certain chemicals or compounds come and collide together to create or destroy full ecosystems, of different kinds, or different planetary states, or different cosmic bodies. And we're kind of a microcosmic representation of that, I think.
We are. It's as above, so below, as they say. I mean, yeah, every atom is its own little solar system, and so that's a comforting thought to think about for me. It's just to think of myself as its own little universe in a way, and itself just a tiny little part in a greater universe.
And carrying that further, that you are also the universe, that you to balance it out, so that one doesn't belittle themselves too much. Well, I'm just the small part of well,
just a little tiny piece.
You're more than that. You are a part of that cosmos, a part of that greater expression, and there is no us, them. There is it's we kind of thinking.
Wow, you've got a lot of really valuable insights into like the spiritual components into music, art, and life, and it's really enjoying listening to your side of this.
It hasn't come without without the difficulty and the struggle to get through that. There's a lot of ego stuff that I've had to dismantle. And
do you feel like you've been successful in dismantling a lot of it?
I'm getting there. I don't feel, I don't think it's a journey where I'll ever arrive, but I think having some sort of awakening, I think that's really important for changing your perspective. You need to have some sort of awakening, and it has to be unique to you and your own experience, your own history. Because even if I were to lay out my own pattern for how I've come to my own awakening. It's not going to be work for everyone, you know.
Right.
Some people have had their awakening from psilocybin and ayahuascan type rituals. Others have had their awakening, they're washing the dishes and suddenly had a realization that, why am I doing things this way? Or some have come through therapy or other life-altering experiences. But it's all of this has really been birthed out of tired of my own shit, tired of my own ego getting in the way, tired of it mattering.
Right.
Why does it matter that I only had 5 Spotify listens last month or whatever, you know? Why does it matter? And I think that if we stop to ask ourselves these sorts of questions and be willing to probe hard, ask lots of deep questions of ourselves, seek out, be curious. That's the big thing, the be curious part.
Yeah.
Being willing to set aside the things that we have come to accept as the norm or as acceptable or as gospel or whatever you want to call it, and wanting to investigate and learning from other people, even learning from people that we disagree with. I think that's been very crucial. Otherwise, like, and I'll use Ram Dass as an example. First of all, I don't ascribe to Hinduism. I don't ascribe to the idea of reincarnation and some of the other really out there spiritual concepts I really wrestle with, and some of them I just fundamentally don't buy into. However, to hold that into tight balance, there have also been a lot of really profound things that Ram Dass has said that made me go, maybe let me play with this idea. And there's nothing wrong with taking an idea that even you disagree with or is challenging to your sensibilities and playing around with it in your mind, writing about it, journaling about it, and taking the time to ask yourself questions and think about how you feel or how you respond to some of this stuff. I think that is what leads people to come to these deep spaces, the deep space that I've found. And it's completely acceptable in my mind if people want to be completely mechanical about their music and that there's no depth to it. It's totally cool. Totally cool. And in the same breath, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for artists, for creators that are willing to step out of their comfort zone and start approaching life, philosophy, spirituality, everything with curiosity and as minimal judgment as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can have a profound transformative experience on you as a human being, as you as an artist and creator. And I think it can have an effect in such a way that it's beautiful. It makes things more beautiful and more sweet. And going back to some of the oneness, this concept of there is no you and me, there is only us, we the universe, we the collective consciousness. It makes it so much easier or accessible to treat people with love.
Oh yeah.
Which has been one of my yogas, to use that term, my karma yoga, which is a path of using life, your life as it is, your daily work, the people that you meet, that way for me has been an exercise of the more difficult people in my life. How can I love them without judgment? How can I treat them the way that I want to be treated? How can that complete stranger that I see on a walk greet them in such a way that they feel like they just had a touch point in the universe, like, wow, they were so friendly, so nice, and leave a mark,
Oh yeah.
And so
I second that emotion.
Yeah. There's something about it. It can really have a transformative experience for yourself and for other people. At least it has the potential. But first and foremost, like I think about like Mother Teresa as an example. People think, oh, it was so nice how she treated the lepers and whatnot, but she wasn't doing it for the lepers, because the minute you start doing something for someone else, you have an us-them relationship now, where it was her motive is really, I'm doing this to draw me in her worldview, drawing me closer to God by ministering to one of God's more disturbing manifestations.
It's about the verb, not the noun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And bringing love to that space, bringing love, acceptance, mercy, compassion to all the facets and expressions of the universe that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
So we're going to take one more break here to listen to another track from Ceramic. This is from his Tender Hearth EP, and this is entitled The Enduring Warmth, here on Ambient Discourses.
That curiosity is a valuable component as well. A lot of times I think we have this predetermined outcome, and we become so settled on achieving that, and we don't become curious and adaptable to the events as they unfold. And information that comes to us, if it's conflicting or we disagree with it, we shield it away instead of just taking it in and just kind of observing how it affects us, or why we disagree with it. Those are some very valuable insights.
The mind job that this does for me is one of the things Ram Dass says is whenever he was teaching a group of people or providing a lecture, he says he would always start out saying, "What I'm about to say is something that you already know within yourself."
Yeah.
Which is an absolute mind job. It's like, wait, I already know all this? And of course, he would further explain that to know this, you have to quiet yourself down. You have to strip away your ego and just listen and quiet down the mind, and the things start to come to you over time. But yeah,
this is true.
I've really enjoyed our conversation, Daman.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Michael. I've I never know what to expect, but again, just being curious and open to things.
Yeah.
I wish I was taking notes, because there's a lot of things that I guess I can listen back to this later.
Actually, I've been doing that every podcast episode as it publishes out. I go back and listen, and I listen again with new ears. Like, all right, what can I learn this time around? What can I pick up again? And I think it's good to kind of meditate on these things, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast to begin with. The podcast is really just the exterior wrapping, the packaging. The real meat and potatoes is I'm curious, and I want to get to know other musicians, dive into their head, dive into their thinking, and the things that drive them as a human being, and try my best to come at it with curiosity and a desire to learn. Doesn't always happen, once in a while I have interviews that I have to slog through, and I'm like, there's no way this is going to be entertaining to listen to. But I want to learn from other people, and I want to also give them the gift of a deep listen to their music, and be able to go, man, I really liked this facet of your music, or this is what you did, and reaffirm it with love and excitement, enthusiasm, and maybe a couple extra listens on Spotify or Apple Music, by drawing a few other listeners to it. So it's my yoga. It's my path that I've.
Well, it's definitely it's felt like a gift to me. So I thank you so much.
You're welcome
for offering.
My thanks to Daman Hoffman of the music project Ceramic. What a splendid conversation. You can find more music from Ceramic out at Bandcamp at ceramicsounds.bandcamp.com. You can also find information about Damon's radio program called Rivulets and Reveries, which is a weekly ambient music show on 103.3 FM KOBV Bentonville Community Radio, with archives available on Mixcloud. You can tune in live Sunday nights from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., as well as find more information at Linktree/Rivulets and Reveries. That's Linktree, that's linktr.ee/Rivulets and Reveries. The links and other information are provided below in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in to Ambient Discourses, conversations with musicians and composers who create musical experiences and sonic landscapes. Until next time, take care.